It's all a bit soggy, wet. But regardless of that, it's warm and safe, apart from the bitey, stingy things. So we'll carry on. Excuse my absence of formal robes, but they're very wet from Pindapata this morning. As is, I'd left the phone in my bag that I take with me, so that might steam up a little too. Anyway, do you want to become enlightened? Do you want to attain to Nibbana, as we call it in Buddhism? See the light, find what it is you're seeking for, become realized, establish what the truth is, what is the meaning of life, why are we here? I hope so. That's what I'm here to share with you, talk to you about, not show you, not teach you, but talk to you about my experience as a Buddhist monk, taking the renunciant path towards, hopefully, freedom from suffering in this lifetime, and to eradicate our defilements, we call kilesas in the Pali language, lobha, dosa, moha, which means greed, hatred and delusion. Now I think we can all quite understand easily greed and also hatred, its opposite, wanting much more of something and disliking and not wanting something, and what paths those lead us down. Delusion, however, is a little bit more difficult to comprehend, or it can be. Now I see so many talks and on Buddhist channels, and even monks and experienced practitioners talking and asking questions, and they kind of talk and talk and talk and talk, but don't really get to the point. We don't get to the point. We're all guilty of that. We talk about it rather than doing it. And if we look at it realistically, it's quite simple what the Buddha taught us. The Four Noble Truths, yes, suffering, cause of suffering, end of suffering, path leading to this end of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. And with that in mind, we go about practicing that Noble Eightfold Path with all diligence, with enthusiasm, with energy, keeping our moral precepts, practicing meditation and developing wisdom. And that's where it gets a little confusing. We start developing wisdom of an inquisitive, intellectual nature, questioning the very simplicity of what the Buddha taught us. And that is that we are ignorant. Avidya, ignorance. This is what kicks off, starts the 12 links of dependent origination. But for clarification, and going back a chapter, going back to I think yesterday's talk, or a talk the day before, it begins with mindfulness in the Noble Eightfold Path, samasati, right mindfulness. So it's not just being careful, watching everything as you step carefully. I'm lifting, moving, placing, speaking, hearing, seeing. But understanding how you're applying that ability to have mindfulness directly to the removal of delusion, to the removal of ignorance. So moha or avidya. Moha is delusion, which is not a lack of knowledge, not a lack of intellectual knowledge, but a lack of knowing what to do with that information, what to do with that knowledge, how to apply it to our everyday lives. Buddha means awakened, and the Buddha was awakened to the truth, but not only the three characteristics of existence, anicca, dukkha, anatta, all things are impermanent, suffering, and not self. Yes, that helps us come to understand, but awakened to it all, everything. Now, I was in India in 2020 when a very famous Bollywood film star died at a very young age. And now, even to this day, there are shrines for this Bollywood star. I don't know of his achievements in life. I've never seen his films. They were around after I'd given up such forms of entertainment and probably wouldn't have come across them anyway. But him, like other superstars we can recall, Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, who died tragically young at the height of fame, have become icons. People who inspire others to be like them. But what do they inspire them to be like? They inspire them to be like what you see on the screen, what you hear on the screen, what you perceive on the screen, which is much like what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, our own experience of thought. And this is summed up, just for clarification again, in these 5 khandhas, those being rupa, the body. And that includes in body the eyes seeing, ears hearing, nose smelling, mouth tasting, skin touching, feeling, temperature, heat. And then going on for the sense doors, with the sense doors there is the mind thinking. But that comes under the next 4 of the khandhas. So the first khandha, rupa, body, bodily seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and feeling, as in the physical touch nature of feeling, followed by vedana, which is feelings as in physical feelings, good or bad, positive, negative, nice or not nice, and mental emotions, again, positive, negative, good or bad, happiness, sadness, are vedana, feelings. This is mind or thinking brain. We can sum up the 5 khandhas as nama rupa. Nama being thinking brain, which is the remaining 4 khandhas, rupa being the body, physical body and its senses, its 5 senses, and then thinking, which is vedana, feelings, sanya, perception, so how you recognize really the stimuli you're getting through those senses, sankhara, which is mental formations, and then vijnana, which is consciousness, thinking brains, active consciousness of all those things that are going on with the other 4 khandhas. That consciousness can be unconscious even when you're alive. So when you're asleep or under anaesthetic, that consciousness was also asleep and under anaesthetic. Someone was asking me about dreams. These are just memories or imagination, memories of the past, imagination of the future. They're phenomena. And they're just occurrences whilst you're asleep, but they're not true to life, actual in the moment goings on through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching, any more than your imagining mind when it wanders sitting in meditation occasionally from one thought to another, to another, to another, that they so often describe as the monkey mind, jumping from one thing to another. The dreams are as uncontrollable as that and are not anything more than phenomena, so should be considered as just that, phenomena of the nama. So the khandhas summed up as nama rupa are what we perceive in the likes of the Bollywood film star, or the James Dean, or the Marilyn Monroe, or the icons like Elvis Presley and such. This is what we know of them. And also, very often, what we know or consider to be ourselves. So often, without understanding, and this is where delusion becomes clear, we consider this, what you see here on your screen and what you can hear now, is just really externally hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin. They don't include eyes in that. I've never understood why the Buddha really didn't include eyes in that, because we do see eyes and they're quite a point of contact. I did have a theory, I've forgotten that theory. So we steer away from theories here on this channel. Someone said, I like that theory of the khandhas. I can't remember the rest of the comments, but it's not a theory any more than the fact is that we all have skin, we have hair, nails, we have teeth. These are just facts, aren't they? It's not a theory that we look like this, we look like this. But what is a theory is perceiving this as being what you are. Perceiving the Bollywood film star as that, the Marilyn Monroe, the James Dean, the Elvis Presley, as what we've experienced of them through our own contact of a very basic visual and audio nature. I'm sure they were very good people, or maybe not. How do we know? Those qualities do come across and are evident in many people's performances. But of course, when we're dealing with performances, performers, there is often a lot of acting or creation involved in that persona. Persona, person, comes from mask, as in the Greek tragedy sort of played mask kind of representation they used to use to depict characters. And it is too true that we are just a persona, a mask to depict our character visually and audibly, and nothing more than that as far as the khandhas are concerned. But the Buddha taught us how to become enlightened through the Noble Eightfold Path, and the emphasis on samadhi, sila, moral virtue, as the foundation, but then samadhi to develop panya, wisdom. Samadhi inclusive in that context as a summarization of the Noble Eightfold Path of sati. So sama samadhi, sama sati, sama samadhi, right mindfulness, right concentration, right meditation, that is, go together like two sides of the same coin. You need both. One needs the other. You develop the ability to concentrate through practicing mindfulness in all of your daily activities. And you develop the ability to have mindfulness in all of your daily activities by practicing to develop samadhi, concentration, while sitting, formally meditating, observing a meditation object. So with this emphasis on mindfulness, we have the Satipatthana Sutta, the four foundations of mindfulness, and they interlink with these khandhas. So if you remember, just to clarify, the khandhas are rupa, which is body, vedana, feelings, sanya, perception, sankhara, mental formations, and vijnana, consciousness. Remember that last one, vijnana, consciousness. It's a word, vijnana meaning consciousness, which can also be unconscious. You can turn it off. In the four foundations of mindfulness, we too have rupa, the body. So we are mindful, we practice mindfulness about all of our bodily actions. I usually say practice mindfulness in all of your actions of body, speech and mind, to sum it up. But the four foundations of mindfulness are rupa, your body, vedana, once again, feelings. So that is physical feelings of the body, but also mental emotions that arise, which are also considered to be feelings, aren't they? Chitta, then, the new word, which is, I usually just say mind, for want of a better word. But it does come into its own, because we have another word for mind, and that is nama. But that is usually used to depict, as in nama rupa, the four khandhas of vedana, sanya, sankhara and vijnana. Feelings, perceptions, mental formations and consciousness. That is nama. It is the thinking brain's form of, when you die, it turns off. When you're unconscious under anaesthetic, it turns off. You may have some subconscious phenomena going on, subconscious, below consciousness. When the active mind is turned off, it carries on dreaming, thinking, and they're processing what has happened before and imagining what might happen next. But it has nothing to do with reality, nothing to do with going on. You might dream heavily during an operation, for instance, but you have no perception of the pain you're experiencing of being cut open, fiddled around with and put back together again, because you're unconscious. So it is vijnana. Now the citta is always awake. It is unconditioned. You could equate it to soul, but it has no personality traits, nothing to connect it other than the ties to the five khandhas through the unmanaged ignorance of desires, wanting and not wanting. Those first of the three kilesas, the three delusions, greed and hatred. So mindfulness, the four foundations of mindfulness, of the body, rupa, of the feelings, vedana, of the mind, citta, and then of the dharma, which is all phenomena. Now, it is all phenomena as in what we can see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and all phenomena that we can think about and create within our minds. It is also all-encompassing. Everything that is out external of our five khandhas, which we witness through those six senses, process and make decisions about, form opinions, judgments, attachments or aversions to. Everything from the wind in the sky, the trees, the sky, the sun, the moon, the planet we're on, the universe, it's all dharma. It's everything of that nature that is part of what we experience. It is all conditioned things, and therefore all subject to anicca, dukkha, anatta. Delusion, so moha, delusion, the third of these defilements, kilesas, is not seeing the difference between citta and nama, or if you like, citta and this vedana, sanya, sankhara, vijnana. In fact, often people say vijnana and citta are the same. Citta is just conscious awareness. Well, there are two completely different words. So we might have similarities that we can draw. We have two words. We have window and we have door. Now, they're two entirely different things. A window is very different to a door, but they have common similarities. They're letting things in or out, external to internal. But we have two words which have different meanings and are very identifiable. Now in the Pali language it's even more unique. There are very few words, if any, that I know of that have one thing has two words or one word has two meanings. It's very simple in that sense, in that there isn't usually a second word for the same thing. So you can be confident to know, not being a Pali scholar, and I'm certainly not, but you can still be confident to know that if there's a word citta and there's a word vijnana, they're two different things. And that is the case, because what it is what you're seeing here is a whole bunch of khandhas, the five khandhas, the heaps, basically the ingredients of what makes up this persona, this mask. And what I see of others is that too, on the face of it. So on a screen looking at celebrities that we've just mentioned, or something like that. When you get to know people, when you live with people and experience their actions of body, speech and mind, their karma that they're producing in their present life, in the present moment, and determining the outcome and their futures, the next moment or their next rebirth. What you're witnessing and experiencing there, which is going into your heart mind, or let's call it chitta, what you're experiencing through that is another dimension entirely. But people whom perhaps are aspiring to be their favourite celebrity, whomever that might be in this day and age, they're aspiring to speak like them, look like them, dress like them, behave like them. They're aspiring to never aging, because the celebrities they see on the screen are always of that age. You see James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, that young Bollywood star. They didn't age, they didn't get sick, they died without aging, without getting sick. So to aspire to be like them now is to aspire to be like a memory. It's false. If you want to be looking like Marilyn Monroe or James Dean now, you might be looking like the dust on the ground here, of which that's all there'll be now, just dust. Return to the elements of dust, earth, of water, puddles, liquid here, of wind, the wind around me, and the temperature, earth, water, wind, fire, solidity, gaseousness, solidity, liquidity, gaseousness, and fire. What's that word? Fire. I say ferrous sometimes, but that just means metal, doesn't it? The nature of fire, temperature, really, is what I'm getting at. That's all they are now. We don't aspire to be like that, though. You aspire to the memory, the old image. And people aspire to that in themselves and build what we call, or has become known as, well, it's not become, it's a very ancient word, ego, personality view. And it is the abandonment of that which is the first stage of enlightenment. But rather than getting fixated on just trying to understand no self or self, personality view or not, and the nature of egos, it's easier to understand how the Buddha demonstrates to us and shows us how we go about just establishing that organically and naturally through our practice. And that is with mindfulness, directed and based with wisdom on these four foundations. So we have mindfulness of our body, bodily actions, mindfulness of the feelings that we're receiving, so everything we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and we think about through the use of this body. That's the rupa side. And mindfulness of the nama side of those khandhas, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. Mindfulness of consciousness, being awake. Are we awake or are we dozing off asleep and dreaming? Mindfulness of that. Is that consciousness of that? That's like saying it's your eyes seeing your eyes, isn't it? No, you can't see your eyes with your eyes. You'd have to look in a mirror or a photograph. 2, consciousness isn't aware of its own state of conscious or unconscious. What is aware, what is knowing, is citta. So the 4 foundations of mindfulness is very important because it separates the 2. Mindfulness of the body, rupa. Mindfulness of Vedana, feelings, coming under nama. But if you like, the 5 khandhas. And this becomes more split up and evident in the 12 links of dependent origination. But that just gets a little bit confusing because we lose sight of the simplicity of this, which is what I'm trying to bring it back to bring us more onto the goal of becoming awake, which is enlightenment, of eradicating delusion, ignorance, avidya. Some 4 foundations of mindfulness then is mindfulness of the citta. So that is like mindfulness of mindfulness, or a mind knowing mind. Well, the only mind that can know, in a sense, the mind is the citta, which knows the nama content of, and the rupa, nama and rupa content of the 5 khandhas. And it's very important that we practice mindfulness of citta, mindfulness of knowing. You'd have heard this phrase commonly throughout this coloured tradition, if we need to call it anything, but of to know and let go is the practice. Well, to know, there has to be something knowing. It is this citta. And to let go, there has to be something to let go of, or not hold on tightly to. That is the 5 khandhas. So you've got here the citta, and here you have the 5 khandhas. You can't see my citta, I can't see my citta. It just knows. You can't see your own, I can't see yours. It just knows. Then we have mindfulness of Dharma, or all phenomena. So that just encapsulates everything else. And you can then expand upon that whole aspect of mindfulness with understanding through the Nama aspect of the 5 khandhas how we deal with the process of contact through sensing, so seeing something, hearing, smelling, tasting or touching, then thinking about it, creating from memory a perception of what something is, either from memory or imagining of what it might be. So if we see a coiled piece of rope and it's dark, we might imagine it to be a snake until light tells us otherwise. Sanya. Vedana, the feelings resulting in that perception of liking or disliking, wanting more of, wanting less of, attachment or aversion. Sankhara, mental formations about overall everything associated with that, and also then imagining what you're going to do about that situation, where you're going to go, retreat to, or how you're going to get more of. And vijnana is just the conscious awareness of that. It can be said that that conscious awareness, that vijnana, is the practical aspect of the thinking brain we use in mindfulness. Why we must be mindful and can only be mindful whilst we're awake, not when we're asleep, when vijnana is unconscious. But the use of that directed is how we're able to see knowing, the knowing aspect of the citta. And that is the 3rd foundation of mindfulness, mindfulness of citta, mindfulness of mind. It doesn't refer to just mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of perceptions, mindfulness of mental formations, or mindfulness of consciousness. It's the reverse. Then you come to see, quite easily, that this is just a sack of skin, bag of bones that you're seeing and hearing now, or I might be seeing and hearing of another. And that does age and get sick, and it does die. And the ignorance, the delusion comes, avijja, ignorance, moha, delusion. 2 words again, slightly different things, of not knowing that that is not what you are. The sum of your 5 khandhas is not the total. The sum, however, of the 4 foundations of mindfulness is the total, because it includes that which knows, that which is able to be liberated from the cycle of rebirth into samsara, the tie to the khandhas, tie to personality view, tie to rites and rituals, not understanding the noble truths, is tying you literally to being reborn in the next moment and into the next life. And I learn a lot about vijnana mindfulness from my little friend here, by the way she so mindfully can move around, even at speed and accurately. But that isn't necessarily samasati, right mindfulness. That is how she survives. That's her survival skill. That is nature. And as beautiful as it isn't samasati. Right mindfulness is applying mindfulness to all four foundations. So not only the body and the feelings, and then also everything else, the Dharma, as in that sense of the word Dharma, because of course Dharma also means the teachings of the Buddha, but they too interlace. But mindfulness of citta, mindfulness of knowing. This is where we're unique in the human realm, in that when we can see desire as just that, wanting something we don't have, through the word of the Buddha, but also as he teaches us, not the trust in his word or the teacher's words, but through our own experience, see the insatiable nature of desire and how it only fuels more ongoing becoming, wanting, desire and suffering. When seeing that clearly, we can let go more easily. We can know and let go. So the monkey in the monkey trap with its hand in the coconut, they make a hole, the monkey puts his hand in to take the fruit, but can't take his hand out of the coconut, because unless he lets go of the fruit, his fist holding the fruit is too big to come out of the coconut. That analogy is much like us, created through our own delusion, avidya, ignorance, which leads to being trapped in that cycle of addiction, cycle of desire. Just knowing to let go, you lose the fruit, monkey, but you are free. Free being the operative word, liberation. The citta too can be free. You too can become enlightened. You don't have to be a Pali scholar. I was asked which translation of the Anapanasati Sutta do I use? Or have I read? Because I refer to it so often, mindfulness of breathing. And to be honest, I can't remember because I've read so many different translations. I wouldn't be able to identify necessarily one translator for another. And frankly, that is the case for all of the suttas that I have read, because I take the core meaning from many translations as being the common denominator, and therefore necessarily and probably the closest to the truth of what the Buddha actually said. So if there's a mistake in one and a mistake in another and a mistake in another, pay no attention to necessarily the different mistakes. But if there's one key point in 4 different translations and everything else is different, that one key point is most probably likely to be true. So I tend to take the core teachings or the words of the Buddha from the suttas rather than spend my life, as very many, and we do need Pali scholars, otherwise we wouldn't have the Pali canon now for us to benefit from. But rather than spend my time at this late stage of life for my practice on that exercise, I'd rather just take the core meaning. And sufficient core meaning and structure of the suttas is contained simply in our regularly chanted chants in the chanting book. It's a good summation in an easily memorized form, using the key Pali words and terminology in the stanzas to help us learn those also. That's another important aspect of chanting. It is learning the teachings of the Buddha, learning the Dharma in that sense. But the Dharma of everything, all conditioned things, is what we are trying to become liberated from. Not by way of annihilation. We cannot know, because there is no way of describing within this conditioned realm the nature of Nibbana. our ultimate attainment, liberation. Because it isn't of a conditioned nature. Like the citta, it isn't impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self, because it is a state rather than a conditioned thing that we've become familiar to. So we can see that even mountain ranges like the Himalayas are not permanent, they're continually changing, and one day will not be, this universe one day will not be there. Here. Where? Case in point. But Nibbana cannot be described as such, but can be glimpsed. A word we use, sunyata, emptiness, to describe a state of mind through deep meditation where, through absorption in your meditation object, attaining to jhanas, you are secluded from the 5 khandhas entirely. So you are separated from, not experiencing, although you have conscious awareness, you have awareness, not vijnana, you have knowing, citta. You are separated from bodily feelings, mental emotions, thought, perception, the 5 khandhas. But mindfulness, as in knowing, is still present, citta. That can glimpse Nibbana, but then cannot be written down, described, other than, well, there was nothing. It was just emptiness. Not in the form necessarily of annihilation, because of the awakening nature of awareness involved in that experience, to be experienced by yourself, as the Buddha frequently reminds us, rather than to be believed or read about in a book. It cannot be described. So, we work on eradicating delusion, not by listening to millions of Dharma talks or reading book after book after book. That's a good start. It gets us in the, we need the fundamental basic understanding. But then by putting it into practice, by firstly building the foundations of moral virtue, keeping the precepts, and as lay practitioners it's just 5. No killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying or taking intoxicants. That's easy enough, isn't it? And then practicing meditation, very important. If you don't, you won't become enlightened. Maybe if you've really nearly got there in previous lives, you're a sotapanna and you're in your final life, you may just step off the bus one day and ping, you're enlightened. But it's possibly, you wouldn't be perhaps needing any reassurance at this stage of your practice of any kind, if that was the stage you were already at in previous lives. But you can get reassurance for yourself through your own experience by sitting in meditation. Yes, by practicing mindfulness. Yes, by all of the dana offering and devotional practices that are so important to building those wonderful qualities that can't be seen, of generosity, the parami, generosity, truthfulness, patience, energy, mindfulness, concentration. I think I said truthfulness and dana, offering, giving, all of these things that are so important qualities in our makeup that do show, are evident on a one-to-one personal relationship basis, but take time to get to know in another. Unless they go around boasting about all their generosity, and then that's not generosity, is it? It's just something they've done as an action to get attention. But most people whom are donating or being generous are altruistic in a very, very discreet and unknown manner. And that is emphasized in Buddhism. By the very way us monks behave on Pindapata in the mornings, and I receive your kind donations here, which help me produce this and keep this situation going to the best of my ability. But we don't say thank you. We may give an anumodana celebration of the good you have done. Even on alms round in the morning, when someone puts food in my bowl, I don't say thank you, because that is a form of contractual agreement, appreciating that I'm benefiting, but we're actually mutually benefiting. This is why we say anumodana, because we're giving the opportunity to give, and you are receiving the opportunity to give. As when I give, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to give, for someone to be able to receive. So my gift can only be really the sharing of my experience, the gift of Dharma, the gift of how these 5 khandhas have experienced this practice and where it's leading to a certain extent. Monks can't speak of their attainments, and it's for a very good reason, because there is no need. But the importance is that the experience has to be of your own and seen for yourself, practiced by yourself. Then you know it's true. And it is far more true and far more evident, and you can see the permanence in citta when you witness it yourself through your own practice, without having to rely on reading about it or believing another. You'll see the impermanent, suffering, not self nature of the body as you age. People do remain ignorant right to the very end of their lives, to that aging, sickness and death. It's culturally inappropriate in many cultures to think of and talk of those things, aging, sickness and death. Whereas you'll see culturally in Buddhist countries, it's reflected upon daily, if not twice daily, if not, as far as monks are concerned, continually. Every moment of the day, with every breath, we're reflecting, this might be our last intake of breath. So what are we doing? How well are we spending our time? So I hope that you can work not only through the practice, as I've spoken on many of these other talks and videos here, about our addressing desire, greed, our addressing aversion, hatred, but really work on seeing clearly through this practice of meditation. Getting rid, finally eradicating delusion through the eradication of ignorance, avijja. Seeing clearly the coming and going of experience, the arising and passing away of all feelings in the 5 khandhas. Knowing their impermanent nature, knowing suffering as a result of that, and knowing how it's out of your control. Always. Everything. This is how the Buddha showed us, quite literally, how to become enlightened. He didn't say, I want you to all go away and discuss for an hour and a half one Pali translation of a subject. I mean, I've watched videos of that and thought, well, I could have spent a better hour than listening to that. And you might feel the same about this, and feel free to comment if you do. But I'm making the point that what we should be looking at is putting this theory, and a theory is just an idea, isn't it? Yeah, into practice. And the 5 khandhas are not a theory. They're the actual breaking down of what we perceive ourselves to be, in order that we can see clearly that's all they are, is those 6 elements. I didn't include space and consciousness as in the citta, in the 4 elements I spoke of earlier, because we were talking about what you could see, what remains. In terms of the physical nature, dhatu, which is the word they use for relics. So after a body's cremated, the dhatu are the relics, what remains. Crystallized bones, often, arahants, crystals are produced. But that is our physical relics. But we are made up whilst we're living, and after the physical body dies and the thinking brain dies, by also space. In terms of physical space, there has to be somewhere for those elements to be, but then the citta, consciousness, knowing, which does not require the conditioned world. And therefore, knowing that is breaking away from Sakkaya Ditthi, personality view. Knowing that is breaking away from the necessity for rites and rituals that you believe might bring you luck or send you to a good rebirth. What will send you to no rebirth, but to be free and liberated into Nibbana, is this practice. That doesn't exclude chanting, because that is not rites and rituals. It is reflecting on the teachings of the Buddha. And then fully understanding the 4 Noble Truths. Well, that there is just the first stage of enlightenment. Sotapanna. If you can attain to that in this lifetime, you're guaranteed to be subject to no more than 7 rebirths. And those will all be in the human realm, where you can experience the Dharma and continue your practice towards Nibbana. So I hope that's brought some more clarification to why we're here and what we're doing whilst we're here. And also more insight as to what I am endeavouring to share with you through these talks, which is my experience of that practice when one renounces worldly life and sets aside everything else that distracts you from the path only. It doesn't mean that you cannot be enlightened also with those other responsibilities, as long as you understand that what is carrying out those other responsibilities is those 5 khandhas, and you keep the knowing of the citta ever present, and have, whilst practicing those 4 foundations of mindfulness, do not lose sight of that very important 3rd foundation of mindfulness, mindfulness of the citta. Because it is that that is liberated. It is that that is enlightenment, free from greed, hatred and delusion, ultimately. Nibbana. So I wish you well, and may your practice be fruitful, be happy and stay well. Until next time, Sukhi Hotu. You're just very insecure. So Rosie, is very insecure at the moment because the other cats keep visiting. So she's become more affectionate. Well, maybe it's that, maybe it's something else. Sorry.